If there were only two of you, thousands of kilometers away from your homeland, would you declare war on the country you were living in on behalf of your own nation? Well, this actually happened, and yes, another entry was added to the ever-growing list of history's most bizarre and absurd events. The other side of the world. Location: Broken Hill, New South Wales, Australia, 1914. Dear friends, picture the map of Australia in your mind. You know, that massive continent empty in the middle and crowded around the edges. Now take a thumbtack and pin it right in the dead center of that emptiness, the place where God supposedly said, "I left this part unfinished. Whatever, let it stay empty." That place is Broken Hill. In 1915, Broken Hill was less of a town and more like a mining settlement that hadn't yet left beta, full of bugs and questionable design choices. The dust there tasted as if the atmosphere itself was shoveling sand straight into your mouth. The heat? The heat. Here, heat wasn't a weather condition, it was a lifestyle, like the deserts of Arabia. You wake up in the morning and the heat slaps you across the face. You eat lunch and before your soup can steam, the bowl itself starts melting. Evening comes and the heat says, "I'm staying late." Everyone's nerves collapse accordingly. And right in the middle of this hell simulation lived one of the most incompatible duos history has ever produced. Absolute matchmaking error. Mullah Abdullah and Gul Muhammad. This is the story of how they decided to challenge the mighty British Empire with nothing but an ice cream cart and rusty rifles. Spoiler, don't look for logic. Logic couldn't even get a visa to this geography. Now, dear friends, let's begin our journey through history by meeting our characters. Mullah Abdullah. Profession: butcher. Age: around 60, still energetic and deeply devout. Origin: Afghanistan. Abdullah was a legend in his trade, a master busher who truly knew his craft. He was also slightly angry about the injustices done to his homeland across the world. Mullah Abdullah lived in Broken Hill's local Muslim camp, which was basically a glorified camel parking lot. The man had one simple concern: slaughtering sheep properly. But Australian bureaucracy, even in 1914, was as irritating as today's visa applications. Abdullah would go to the municipality and say, "Let me turn the animal towards Mecca and slaughter it according to my faith." And the municipality would respond with excuses like, "Sorry, Mr. Abdullah, according to Union Regulation Article 412B, the animal must be a registered union member before death, and its final wishes must be notarized." Abdullah grew tense, like a forum user who keeps getting banned for no clear reason. Every day, he walked the dusty streets stroking his beard, thinking, "One day I will bring this meaningless bureaucracy to its knees." That day had not yet come. For now, he simply chased flies, and in Broken Hill, the flies were about 3 times the size of humans and were probably unionized. Our other main character, Gul Muhammad. Profession: ice cream vendor / former camel trader. Age: unknown, probably between 30 and 40, but since his ID was written on camel skin parchment paper, we can't be sure. Origin: Tiro Valley, Afghanistan. Also known as the real-life inspiration for the FPS map, Dust 2. Special ability: tactical ice cream distribution. Using an ice cream cart as camouflage, plus 50. Inventory: one-wheeled ice cream cart, loot box, vanilla-flavored ice cream, a hidden Ottoman flag, rifle ammunition hidden inside ice cream cones. Just kidding, your friends, relax, no need to get angry. Gul Muhammad, unlike Abdullah, was more outgoing. He had that unmistakable social media influencer energy. If Instagram had existed in 1915, his bio would have read something like warrior / ice cream lover / Ottoman Empire stan / DM for collabs. Gul sold ice cream. Yes, you heard that right. In the scorching interior of Australia, where the heat literally melted asphalt, an Afghan warrior, was selling ice cream to children. He was like a Navy SEAL teaching finger painting at a kindergarten. But Gul Muhammad's ice cream cart wasn't just a dessert delivery vehicle. It was a strategic mobile base, a literal respawn point. Every time Gul dipped his scoop, he was actually planning the Ottoman Empire's World War strategy in his head. This scoop of vanilla, British colonialism. That chocolate sauce, my revenge, he muttered while serving customers. The customers, meanwhile, looked at each other like, what is this guy even saying? And walked away licking their half-melted ice creams under the brutal sun. One day, probably a Tuesday, because for some of us, Tuesdays are the most boring days in the universe, Mullah Abdullah had once again been kicked out of the municipality. In his hand was a rejected slaughterhouse license application. He was gripping the paper so tightly that the cellulose molecules were about to undergo nuclear fusion and turn to diamonds. The heat was intense enough to make a human brain leak out through the ears. As Abdullah walked down the dusty road, he spotted Gul Muhammad's ice cream cart shining under the sun. A lightning bolt went off in his head. Gul Muhammad was hiding in the cart's shade, calmly puffing on his pipe. Abdullah approached. "Peace be upon you," Abdullah said, his voice cracked like a dried riverbed. "And upon you, Mullah," Gul replied without removing the pipe from his mouth. "Rejected again." "Don't ask," Abdullah said, squatting down. "These people, they won't let me slaughter sheep. They talk about hygiene standards. Man, I've delivered camels with these hands. Camels." "Relax, Gul," said Abdullah, handing him a scoop of half-melted lemon ice cream. "Cool down. You'll melt in this heat otherwise." Abdullah eyed the ice cream suspiciously. It was probably the strangest thing he'd ever eaten, but Pete didn't refuse. The two men sat in silence for a while, staring into Australia's endless red, dusty void. That's when Broken Hill's communication network kicked in. In 1915, communication worked like this. Someone got off a train and shared a rumor. The rumor was exaggerated at the bar, distorted at the brothel, censored at church, and eventually reached your ears. Slower than the modern internet, but the fake news rate was almost identical. The camel trader passing by, a new member joining the group chat, shouted at them, "Hey, did you hear? The Caliph has declared jihad. When jihad is declared, all Muslims must act as one." Abdullah and Gul looked up at the same time, as if a big yellow exclamation mark had appeared above their heads. "What?" Abdullah said. "Jihad. Which sultan gave this order?" "Sultan Mehmed Rashad," the camel trader replied excitedly. "We've allied with the Germans. We're going after the British, the French, the Russians, everyone in our way. They say all Muslims must take up arms." The camel trader tossed them a newspaper, which was about 3 months old, and left. Abdullah grabbed it. Reading Ottoman Turkish took him a while. His eyesight was bad, and glasses back then were considered a luxury accessory. "It's true, Go," Abdullah said, his voice trembling. "The Caliph of the Muslim world is calling us, the great jihad." Gul Muhammad knocked his pipe against a stone. The cheerful ice cream vendor's sparkle in his eyes vanished, replaced with full-on Call of Duty Desert Ops mode. "Mullah," he said, "we're here. The Sultan is in Istanbul. Between us are oceans, the British Navy, and worst of all, visa issues. How are we supposed to get there?" Their excitement was at its peak. And this is where the story takes its most absurd turn. With a strategy that clearly failed geography class, the two men made a decision that would change the fate of the world, or at least the third page of the local newspaper. Abdullah stroked his beard. The processor in his brain was showing an overheating warning. "Gul," he said, "the Sultan says, strike wherever you are. If we can't go to the front, we bring the front here." And no, this is not a joke. That's exactly what happened. Gul Muhammad looked at the ice cream cart, and at the endless desert, and then back to Abdullah. "So you're saying," Gul said slowly, "the two of us with this ice cream cart and your rusty knives are going to declare war on the entire Australian continent?" Abdullah narrowed his eyes. "Why not? The Australian army is fighting ours at Gallipoli right now. This place is empty. The island has no one left. I think they're extremely vulnerable." This logic was, in its own twisted way, perfectly consistent. Of course, only if you think real life is Age of Empires. According to Abdullah's theory, the Australian army had moved to the other side of the map. Broken Hill was just sitting there like an undefended villager unit. Gul Muhammad grinned. The idea was completely insane, and that's exactly why he loved it. He was tired of selling ice cream, tired of kids whining, "Uncle, give me one for free." Little action, the smell of gunpowder, and a minor international diplomatic crisis sounded like not bad at all. "All right," Gul said. "I'm in. I'm creating the WhatsApp group, Broken Hill Revenge Brigade. Admins only can send messages. Strategic planning, starting with turning an ice cream cart into a tank." The decision had been made. Our two-man army retreated through the dusty streets of Broken Hill to their secret headquarters, Abdullah's shack. It was time to move on to the equipment preparation phase. Mullah Abdullah dragged wooden chest into the middle of the room. What came out of it was somewhat insufficient for starting a war. 2 old rifles, probably leftovers from the Napoleonic Wars, with an estimated accuracy rate of 4%. A handful of bullets, half of them moldy from humidity. Abdullah's butcher knives, not bad for close combat. Gul Muhammad's homemade pistol. The chance of it exploding was higher than the chance of it firing. "That's it?" Gul asked, staring at the rusty rifle in his hands. "With this, you couldn't even shoot a rabbit, Mullah. When you load the bullet, the gun looks at you like, 'Bro, are you sure about this?'" "It runs on faith," Mullah said firmly, "and besides, we have logistical support." He pointed outside, toward the ice cream cart parked nearby. Gul Muhammad almost swallowed his uvula. "That cart, that will be our tank." Gul looked lovingly at his cart, a creaky wooden pushcart with "fresh ice cream, 1 penny" written on it. "Mullah, that's an ice cream cart. It has no armor. Its top speed is 3 kilometers per hour. Its deadliest weapon is probably giving kids brain freeze." "Be creative, Gul," Mullah shouted. "We'll load it with ammunition. We'll hang our flag on it. That cart will roll through the streets of Broken Hill. When the enemy sees an ice cream vendor, they'll lower their guard. Just as they say, 1 scoop of vanilla, please. Bam, jihad." This was the genius and equally stupid part of the plan. Camouflage. No one suspects true ice cream vendors, especially not in Australia, a country where the biggest threat is usually a poisonous spider. That night, they discussed the details of the operation. Since they couldn't find a map, Abdullah drew in the dirt with his finger. "This is the railway," Abdullah said, drawing a line. "Every New Year, the townspeople go on a picnic. The train is packed. The picnic train." "The picnic train?" Gul asked. "So no soldiers, civilians?" "The soldiers are in Gallipoli. We said this already," Abdullah snapped. "These are the soldiers' relatives. They're supporters. They all count as enemy war supporters. Also, the inspector who tried to shut down my butcher shop last week will be on that train. This is personal, strategic." Gul Muhammad seemed convinced. To be fair, he was already fired up. The Afghan warrior inside him had awakened, overpowering the smell of vanilla. "All right, the operation starts tomorrow morning. What's the code name?" "Operation Broken Hill," Abdullah replied. "Too plain," Gul said. "I vote for Operation Ice Cream Cone or Angry Sun. Whatever, we'll decide on the way." Final preparations and farewell letters, the ones that were never sent. As the first rays of morning light fell over Broken Hill, the temperature had already hit 30 degrees Celsius. The flies had started their workday and buzzing around and holding meetings like, "Good morning, everyone. Who are we biting today?" Abdullah and Gul met beside the ice cream cart. They had emptied the ice cream containers and replaced them with bullets, gunpowder, and a homemade Ottoman flag Abdullah had pulled out of an old chest. The flag was a bit wrinkled and the crescent looked more like a banana, but intention mattered more than aesthetics. "Did you perform ablution?" Abdullah asked. "I did," Gul replied. "I also oiled the weapons, and I greased the cartwheels. It doesn't squeak anymore. Stealth mode activated." The two men began pushing the ice cream cart toward the outskirts of town, toward the hill where the train tracks passed. No, there was no tank beneath them, but they believed. The scene looked like a tragicomic work of art. Up front, an angry white-bearded Mua wielding a butcher's knife. Behind him, an ice cream vendor pushing the cart, pistol at his waist, pipe in his mouth. A few people they passed greeted them. "What's up, Ghoul? You're early today? Ice cream service?" a miner asked. Ghoul replied calmly, "Yes, John, today we're serving a very special flavor. It's called the Wrath of the Empire. Might taste a bit bitter." The miner laughed. "It sounds interesting. I'll try it later." "They won't be a later," Ghoul muttered as he kept pushing the cart. "Limited edition." When they reached the hill, the sun was already overhead, boiling their brains. They needed to dig trenches, but the ground was so hard that when the pickaxe hit it, it made a metallic clang. "We can't dig trenches," Abdullah said, gasping. "I've found another solution. We'll hide behind the ice cream cart." "Mullah," Ghoul said nervously, "this cart's wood is 2 centimeters thick. If someone throws a rock, it'll go straight through. Are we sure about this?" "God is with us, Ghoul," Abdullah declared. "Besides, this is Australia. Their strongest weapon is a boomerang. We'll be fine." Abdullah was about to learn, very painfully, that not everyone in Australia uses boomerangs and that police and civilians also own firearms. But for the moment, ignorance was bliss. Abdullah pulled a piece of paper from his pocket. It was a letter he had written to the Sultan. Of course, he couldn't mail it. UPS didn't service the area. "I'm putting this here under the stone," Abdullah said. "If we become martyrs, let them know we were not just an ice cream vendor and a butcher. We were the Ottoman Forces Command of the Oceania continent." "So a 2-man army?" Ghoul said. "Yes, we may be few in number, but our faith is strong. And most importantly," Abdullah lifted the cart's lid and stared at the last puddle of melted ice cream water, "we have nothing left to lose. They canceled my license, Ghoul. My license." Abdullah's motivation was 50% holy war, 50% bureaucratic rage. Ghoul Muhammad, on the other hand, was just looking for adventure, and maybe his brain had slightly melted in the heat. On the horizon, the train's smoke appeared, thick black plume rising into the bright blue sky. "They're coming," Ghoul said, resting his rifle on the cart. "Be ready," Abdullah replied. "Now we'll show them who the real owners of Gallipoli are." The train slowly approached the hill. Inside were hundreds of civilians, women, children, vacationers, sandwiches in hand, cold drinks at their sides. None of them had any idea that they were got to be attacked by 2 men with an ice cream cart. Abdullah tightened the sash around his waist. "Ghoul," he said, "if this is over, if we survive—" "Yes, Mullah. Give me the recipe for that pistachio ice cream. You make it really well." A brief emotional moment passed, but they quickly pulled themselves together. Ghoul smiled. He cocked his rifle. "I promise, Mullah. I promise." 2 tears slipped from his eyes as he turned his face away. And so, one of the strangest, most pointless, and most tragicomic wars in Australian history was about to begin. 2 men, 1 ice cream cart, 1 entire continent. The odds were not fair. For Australia, that is, because Australians had not learned how powerful a weapon madness could be. In Part 2, the train ambush, the ice cream cart's ballistic test, and the police arriving at the scene saying, "What the hell is this nonsense?" As we said, the event itself played out like a full-blown comedy movie scene. Who even thinks of turning an ice cream cart into a tank? We're heading back to the strangest war in history. Grab your tea, grab your coffee, and get ready for a story about logic melting under the scorching heat of Broken Hill. Let's begin. This is Part 2 of the 2-man World War, also known as the Ice Cream Apocalypse. Part 2. Fighting with a rifle and an ice cream cone. The Tactical Panzer Transformation. The interior of Australia was a place God may have simply forgotten, a never-ending texture of red dust and dry shrubs. It felt like hell's demo version. The heat was so intense that even your shadow would try to abandon you and hide under a tree to cool off. And in this environment, as the fateful morning of 1915 approached, inside a tin shack just outside the town of Broken Hill, the most ambitious and most poorly planned military operation in world history was about to begin. The operation had no code name, because to have a code name you need at least a 3-person committee, a whiteboard, and probably some chalk. Here there were only 2 people, Mullah Abdallah and Ghoul Muhammad, a mighty army of 2. The pair sat at a wobbling table in their shack staring at their limited inventory. The situation was like starting an RPG at level 1, wearing nothing but torn underwear and holding a rusty fork, and then charging straight at a level 80 British Empire boss. The War Room, also known as the Room Full of Flies. Mullah Abdallah adjusted his sweat-soaked turban. On his face was the deep existential rage of a small business owner who had just been denied a license by the municipality. The Australian authorities had cancelled his animal slaughter permit. As if that wasn't enough, while trying to survive by selling ice cream, he was constantly harassed by inspectors, or the era's equivalent, grumpy colonial officials providing suppressive bureaucratic fire. For Mullah Abdallah, this war wasn't a geopolitical maneuver, it was a massive customer service complaint. He made a mental note to report it to the Ministry of Interior later. Gul Mohammed, on the other hand, was different. He was fully hyped. He genuinely believed that the Ottoman Empire had declared them honorary soldiers, based on an authority document they more or less invented themselves. Gul was excited like someone about to enter a war, or invest in a high-risk crypto project. "Now listen, Mul," he said, trying to chase a fly off the table. "The plan is simple. The train comes. We're there. The train stops. We start shooting. And just like that, our empire is saved. Bam, bam, bam." Mullah weighed the ice cream scoop in his hand like it was a grenade. "Gul," he said with a deep sigh, "we're up against an empire. What do we have? 2 rifles, 3 boxes of ammo, and vanilla ice cream. Sure, great start, but where's our logistics? Where's the Air Force? Where's the support lie? Well, people ask these questions." Gul grinned. "We are the logistics, brother. The caravan assembles on the road. Besides, they say the Caliph declared jihad. I read it in the newspaper. Okay, the paper was 6 months old. Maybe he changed his mind, but whatever. News arrives late out here. Morale is high." The evolution of the ice cream cart. The most critical phase of the war was transforming Mullah Abdallah's livelihood, the ice cream cart, into a military weapon. This was, without question, the most absurd chapter in history. The cart was a simple 2-wheeled white-painted wooden box with the words ice cream written on it. Under normal circumstances, the maximum threat this vehicle posed was giving a lactose-intolerant child a stomachache. But in the vision of Mullah and Gul, this thing was a German Panzer. "We need to camouflage it," Gul said, circling the cart. "With what?" Mullah asked. "All we have is red dust and ice cream cones." "Exactly," Gul replied. "Tactical camouflage, desert color." While Mullah was oiling the cart's wheels, the lubricant was most likely leftover sheep tail fat. Gul Mohammed was busy reinforcing the vehicle's armor. And by armor reinforcement, we mean nailing 2 extra wooden planks to the side and praying, "Inshallah, this will be bulletproof." They were gambling with their lives, but as everyone knows, the house always wins. Loading ammunition into the cart turned into a full-blown game of Tetris. "Don't put the bullets in the ice cream compartment," Mullah warned. "If they mix with the melted ice cream, the rifle will get sticky. Reload time doubles." "But that's the safest place." I said no. We are not firing vanilla-flavored bullets at the British. In the end, the ice cream cart was designed to function as an ammo depot, a trench, and if the war dragged on and they got hungry, a catering service. The only thing missing was a sign reading, "Gul and Mullah Ltd, Jihad and Ice Cream Services." Aerodynamically, the cart was no better than a brick. One of the wheels wobbled slightly, which meant that on the way to the battlefield they would be sending the enemy audible notifications going, "Creak, creak, creak." Stealth level, -50. Weapon maintenance, and cone technology. The most critical part of the preparations was weapon cleaning. The duo possessed Martini Henry and Snyder Enfield rifles, most likely manufactured immediately after the Great Flood. These weapons were so old that when you pulled the trigger, you had to submit a formal request for the bullet to exit the barrel. Mullah Abdallah searched for a cloth to clean his rifle. He couldn't find one. "Good, wherever the cloth?" "I wrapped it around my turban. I'm wiping off sweat." "Then what am I supposed to clean the barrel with?" Mullah looked around. His eyes landed on the unsold, stale ice cream cones. Could this work? He thought. Why not? This is innovation. And yes, Mullah Abdallah performed the first and only recorded instance in history of cleaning a rifled barrel with an ice cream cone. The hardened texture of the stale cone proved surprisingly effective at scraping rust and gunpowder residue from inside the barrel. The only side effect was a faint smell of burnt biscuit drifting from the muzzle. This rifle now has +5 fire damage, Mullah muttered. The British won't know what hit them. They'll take a bullet, but in their final moments, they'll smell a bakery. This is psychological warfare. Meanwhile, Gul Muhammad was busy polishing his pistol. The safety catch was broken, the sights were crooked, and the grip was held together with tape, or whatever existed at the time, probably resin and string. What will you do if that gun jams? Mullah asked. I'll throw it. I'll throw it at their heads. Bullet or chunk of iron, it doesn't matter. Every army needs a flag. Brand recognition matters. On the battlefield, it should be clear who's shooting whom. Unfortunately, they didn't have an Ottoman banner. Ordering one from AliExpress would take 3 months, and back then, AliExpress still operated via camel caravans. We'll make our own flag, Gul Muhammad said with the confidence of an artist. Materials. A piece of red fabric, probably an old tablecloth or one of Mullah's spare underwear. White paint. Lime. Stick. A twisted eucalyptus branch. Gul spread the red fabric on the ground. Now I'll draw a crescent and a star right here. The problem was that Gul Muhammad's artistic talent competed directly with that of a 3-year-old drawing Dad on the wall. He dipped the brush, a stick with the cloth tied to the end, and applied it to the fabric. What emerged looked less like a crescent and more like a genetically modified banana or a grinning worm. The star resembled a starfish that had been in a traffic accident. Mullah Abdallah examined the result. What is this? A crescent and a star. Gul, this looks more like a caution, slippery floor sign. In the chaos of battle, no one will notice, Gul said defensively. What matters is intention. From afar, they'll say, these are Ottomans. From afar, they'll say, these guys opened an ice cream shop but couldn't design a logo. Still, the battle standard was tied to the pole and mounted onto the ice cream cart. Sorry, the Panzer. As the wind blew, the flag waved proudly. Its amorphous shapes spread not fear, but profound confusion among the enemy. Nonsense and final checks. By the time the midday sun reached its peak, preparations were nearly complete. But logistics were the most merciless front of the war. Inventory list. 2 rifles, condition 12% durability. 1 pistol, condition 5% durability, 95% luck factor. An unknown amount of ammunition, as much as fits in your pockets. 1 ice cream cart, modified. 1 handmade flag, aesthetic disaster. Food supplies, 3 loaves of bread, some halva, and a rapidly melting stock of ice cream. Mullah Abdullah inspected the cart one last time. Did you bring water, Gul? Gul froze, his eyes widened. Water? Yes, water, that transparent liquid required for survival in the desert. I forgot the water while grabbing the ammo. Mullah slapped his face. Perfect. So even if we don't kill the British, we'll die of thirst. This isn't a suicide mission. This is a save the homeland mission. There'll be water on the train, Gul said optimistically. We'll take it as war loot. Those guys are believers too, probably. Mullah couldn't argue with this logic because it was already too late. The sun had begun frying his brain, and his ability to think rationally dropped in perfect inverse proportion to the temperature. The 2 men stepped out of the shack. They began pushing the ice cream cart. The wheels creaked. The flag swayed sadly in the breeze. We're going, Gul said. History will write about us, Mullah. History will write about us by asking why, Mullah corrected, and he wasn't wrong. History would include them, but most likely in the comedy section. The plan was simple. They would go to the railway outside town, use the ice cream cart as power, and declare a war on innocent train passengers heading out for a picnic. In their eyes, that train was an armored beast of British imperialism. In reality, it was an open-air excursion train filled with gossiping aunties and tired miners eating sandwiches. The waiting room of the Battle of Broken Hill was now empty. The game was about to begin. There was no loading screen, only dust, sweat, and the smell of vanilla. 2 men, 1 ice cream cart, and 0 logic. The world was about to witness the strangest war ever fought on the Australian continent. Mullah Abdullah disengaged the safety on his rifle, forcing it because it was rusted, and muttered, "All right then, ghoul. Either the state prevails, or the ravens feast, or the ice cream melts in the sun." To be continued in Episode 3, The Waiting Ends. The first rise of morning fell over a broken hill as if God himself were holding a gigantic magnifying glass over the earth, trying to burn ants for fun. Australian heat is no joke, folks. This isn't the kind of heat where you say, it's humid just like Antalya. This is the kind of heat where even your shadows start sweating, flies evaporate mid-air, and kangaroos apply for bank loans just to install air conditioning in their pouches. And right in the middle of this cosmic microwave oven stood our 2 anti-heroes, Mullah Abdullah and Gul Muhammad. Abdullah had already performed his morning prayer, spiritually topped up and emotionally fulfilled. Physically, however, his condition was questionable, hovering around 60% thanks to age and the gentle but persistent debuff of rheumatism. Gul Muhammad, on the other hand, Gul. He was so perfectly suited to be the comic relief of this story that even the screenwriters would have felt sorry for him. Gul's greatest strategic asset was not a Panzer tank, nor an F-16. What Gul possessed was a creaky-wheeled paint-chip ice cream cart, probably still bearing the sign, Fresh Marash-style ice cream, Australian edition. Yes, you heard that right. The great offensive was about to begin with an ice cream cart. If this were a strategy game, the moment Gul placed an ice cream cart into the logistics vehicle slot, the defeat screen would have already been loading. But this was real life, and in real life, sometimes you don't get to choose your equipment. Reviewing the preparation phase. The 2 men pushed the ice cream cart to a place called White Rocks, marked on the map as high ground, but in reality, a terrible hiding spot. They hung the glorious flag of the Ottoman Empire on the cart, and as it fluttered lightly in the breeze, it created a strange contrast with the cart's overall vibe of no free cones today. Abdullah wiped down his Martini Henry rifle. The weapon dated back to the 1870s, so old that even the rifle itself was probably waiting for its retirement pension. Rate of fire, 2 rounds per minute. Reload time, required overtime pay. Gul Muhammad checked his own rifle and the machete hanging from his belt. "Abdullah," said Gul, wiping sweat from his face, "do you think this flag will affect my ice cream sales? I mean, after we win the war and I go back to business, could it hurt my brand value?" Abdullah sighed deeply. Going to war with this man was like carrying a teammate in Valorant, constantly. "Gul," said Abdullah, his voice dry as the desert wind, "if we win this war, all of Australia will be ours. You'll hand out ice cream for free." Just as they were drifting into these fantasies, "The train is coming." "Right," said Gul, narrowing his eyes. "I'm a logistical genius. I'll turn an entire continent into an ice cream empire." Target spotted. The picnic train. Boss fight. On the horizon appeared the train carrying members of the Manchester Unity Order of Oddfellows. Look at that name. Sounds like a secret society straight out of Harry Potter. But in reality, it was just uncles and aunties going on a picnic. The train was carrying around 1,200 people. 1,200. Facing them were, well, fully equipped, or rather fully contented, 2 men. The ratio was 1 to 600. The Spartans stood against the Persians with 300 men, and that was cool. Our guys, 2 men challenging 1,200 picnic goers from behind an ice cream cart. Mathematically speaking, This was suicide squared. The train consisted of open mining wagons with canvas roofs. Inside were innocent civilians planning the best picnic day of their lives. Boiled eggs, cold-cut sandwiches, and most likely lukewarm beer in hand. The atmosphere inside the train was calm, like a lazy Sunday market, completely unaware. "Oh dear," said Mrs. Sheila to Mrs. Margaret, "don't you think there are fewer flies this year?" Mr. Bob joked, "I just hope we don't run on a beer, otherwise I'll have to have a serious talk with the driver." None of them had any idea that in a glitched section of the map called White Rocks, two men with antique rifles were aiming straight at them. Action begins. First blood, or something like it. As the train approached Abdullah and Gul's ambush point, the distance closed to about 30 meters. For rivals of that era, this counted as long range. Honestly, throwing the rifle might have done more damage than firing it. Abdullah took aim, held his breath, which was hard enough in that heat, and pulled the trigger. Bam! Silence. Then Gul fired. Bam! The reaction inside the train was not the chaos one might expect. No Hollywood-style shouting of, "Get down, ambush." No, this was the most Australian reaction imaginable. A voice came from one of the wagons. "Oh, look, Bob, fireworks." Yes, as bullets embedded themselves into the wagons, people thought it was part of the entertainment. How thoughtful of that ice cream. Selling ice cream and firing blanks in our honor. Now that's service. Abdullah lowered his scope, if he'd had one, and stared in disbelief. "Abdullah," he said, "Gul, they're not taking cover. Why aren't they taking cover? At these blanks, why are they scared?" "I don't know, brother," Gul said, trying to chamber another round and pinching himself in the process. "Maybe the bullets got wet?" Abdullah snapped. "Keep firing. They'll figure it out eventually." The two men continued firing from behind the ice cream cart, which was tactically no different from hiding behind a cardboard box. Bullets began whizzing into metal parts of the train, wooden benches, and unfortunately, some unlucky passengers. That was when reality hit. When a passenger was struck and fell, the crowd's "Is this a joke?" quickly turned into "Oh hell no, this ice cream guy is actually trying to kill us." Panic broke out. But not Hollywood panic. This was picnic panic, the kind where people hesitate between saving their lives and not crushing their sandwiches. Get the children down, but don't squish the sandwiches. Yo, forget the sandwiches, save yourselves. Ice cream cart cavalry charge tactics. Gul Muhammad was fully hyped by the chaos. He felt like one of the riders of Rohan in Lord of the Rings. The only difference was that instead of a horse, he had a cart full of melting vanilla ice cream beneath it. He stood up, raised his rifle, about to shout something heroic, when Abdullah grabbed him by the collar and yanked him back down. "Sit your idiot self down, you lid bullets." "But brother, we have the morale advantage." "Morale advantage? They have a train. We have a dairy warehouse melting under the sun. Do the math." Meanwhile, return fire began, sort of. Since the people on the train were civilians, their counterattack was primitive. Some threw stones. Others, probably the angriest ones, attempted to throw empty beer bottles. For Abdullah and Gul, the situation was this. They were like two players using cheats on an entire continent, but the only cheat they had enabled was unlimited confidence. And unfortunately, that cheat did not provide protection against bullets. The train's escape and the great disappointment. Once the engineer grasped the seriousness of the situation, meaning he started hearing people shout, "Floor it, man," from the wagons, he pushed the throttle all the way forward. The train slowly began to pick up speed. Abdullah watched the retreating train, staring after it as it disappeared into the distance. "They're running," he said sadly. "My ammo wasn't even finished." Gul Muhammad, meanwhile, was dealing with a far more practical problem. "Abdullah, the train is gone. We're still here, and the ice cream is completely melted, which means all we have left is warm, sugary milk. This is a logistical disaster." As the train vanished, leaving behind a cloud of dust and chaos, The two attackers were left alone at White Rocks. The first phase of their plan, destroy the train and achieve victory, had instead resulted in put some holes in the train and seriously annoy everyone. So, now what? Going back wasn't an option. Reloading was impossible. Abdullah slung his rifle over his shoulder. Sweat dripped down from his beard. "Ghoul," he said, "we're switching to Plan B." "Did we have a Plan B?" Ghoul asked innocently. "Plan B is this. We run from here and keep fighting until we die. Because 5 minutes ago we declared war on an entire country. And trust me, the police will be here any moment now. And Australia's 5-star wanted level doesn't reset by driving into a paint shop like in GTA." Ghoul cast a sorrowful glance at the ice cream cart. "Are we leaving the cart here? I just finished paying it off in installments." "Leave the damn cart, Ghoul. We're infantry now." Cutaway scene. Meanwhile, the Australian police get the call. Back in the town of Broken Hill, phone lines, telegraph lines, were lighting up. Message: someone attacked the picnic train. Reply: who? Message: no idea. They look like ice cream vendors. Reply: what the hell? Did ice cream prices go up that much? The police chief was having the shock of his life. Mullah Abdullah and Ghoul the ice cream man. Our Abdullah, the one who saved me a camel chop last week. The officer nodded. Yes, sir. Seems they decided to take action before waiting for the customer satisfaction survey. The chief adjusted his hat. All right, boys, grab you guns. Mobilize the whole town. Today, we're closing the ice cream season early in Broken Hill. The road of no return. Abdullah and Ghoul abandoned the ice cream cart, that loyal wheeled fortress, and began climbing toward the higher rocks. There was no turning back anymore. The visa was canceled, the residence permit burned, and the citizenship application had been firmly rejected. While climbing, Ghoul asked Abdullah between heavy breaths, "How do you think history will remember us, Abdullah? As heroes?" Abdullah stopped and looked toward the horizon. In the distance, police vehicles and armed civilians were approaching, kicking up clouds of dust. Most likely, Abdullah said, as the strangest duo in history, veterans of the ice cream wars. But at least we didn't live a boring life, right? Ghoul smiled. He grinned with a piece of tobacco stuck between his teeth. You're right. And that shot where I shattered the train window, legendary. I just wish our Sultan had been there to watch us. And so the two men walked toward their final stop, leaving behind an abandoned ice cream cart, melted dreams, and an entire army closing in on them. Next episode, out of bullets, should we throw rocks? Hazırsan okuyunuz, bir sonraki bölümde tonu girazda. Final curtain at White Rocks. If you're ready, we're moving on to the fourth and final chapter. Spoiler warning, this story does not have a happy ending. So, come on, let's push that ice cream cart to its final stop. The White Rocks map. Yes, dear history lovers, and especially you keyboard generals who say, I would have managed this war way better in Civilization 6. Mullah Abdallah and Gul Muhammad had made a slight intelligence error. The famous picnic train they attacked was not full of armed soldiers, but of miners and families, although, to be fair, some of those civilians were armed. After opening fire, they realized things were not going exactly as planned, but by then, it was already too late. What was the plan? Stop the train, fight for the empire, become either a veteran or a martyr. Unfortunately, Step 3 had now evolved into, run, the entire continent of Australia is after us. The duo had reached a full GTA-style 5-star wanted level, except instead of a Ferrari to escape in, they had a squeaky-wheeled, brick aerodynamic and, suspiciously, vanilla-scented ice cream cart. Under the merciless Australian sun, in the brain-melting heat of Broken Hill, around 40 degrees Celsius, basically a CPU running without a cooler, They made a strategic decision. White Rocks. White Rocks was a hill made of jagged quartz formations, a place that looked like a bugged-out section of the map. Great for taking cover, absolutely terrible for escaping. In other words, a perfect camping spot. Every FPS player knows this rule. If you camp behind rocks at the edge of the map, eventually someone throws a grenade at your head, or the admin bans you. For Mullah Abdallah and Gul Muhammad, the admin was the Australian government. The logistics nightmare. The tactical ice cream cart. As they retreated toward White Rocks, the ice cream cart, now referred to simply as the cart or the panzer, came with them. Why would you bring an ice cream cart into a firefight? Possible reasons. A. It contains ammunition. B. It can be used as cover. C. War is stressful. Blood sugar might drop. The answer was probably all the above. But moving that cart across rough terrain was about as painful as Death Stranding. Sam Porter Bridges hauling 200 kilos of cargo up a mountain. The wheels sank into the dirt, the wooden frame creaked, and every grrrch sound was loud enough to even make kangaroos kilometers away turn around like, "Bro, what are you doing?" Gul Muhammad, being younger and in relatively better shape, was most likely the one pushing the cart. Mullah Abdallah, empowered by age and chronic back pain, contributed mostly moral support and navigation. That one. No, the other one. Eventually, they reached White Rocks. They planted their flag, still that homemade, deeply questionable Ottoman banner, on the highest rock. The message was meant to be, "This territory is ours. Enter and die." What it actually said was, "Please shoot here. We are right here." Tactical intelligence, 10 top 10. The Australian forces versus 2 Ottoman soldiers. Meanwhile, chaos had erupted in Broken Hill. When news of the train attack reached town, it spread like a viral message in a WhatsApp group, except instead of nature photos, people were sharing revenge. And it wasn't just the police. It wasn't just soldiers either. Who showed up? Local police, handguns included, a few military personnel, better weapons, the Broken Hill Rifle Club, by far the most dangerous group, middle-aged Australian uncles who shoot bottles on weekends and thought, finally a real reason to use this rifle. Miners, no pickaxes, plenty of anger, and probably a few random passers-by who just wanted some action. So instead of a professional army, Mullah Abdallah and Gul Muhammad were facing everyone on the server. You know how in games there's sometimes a boss event and all 64 players in the map swarm a single dragon? That dragon was our 2 heroes. The only difference was the dragon didn't breathe fire, it just fired rusty rifles. The fight begins, risk level extremely high. At around 1 p.m., White Rocks was fully surrounded. The Australians formed a wide circle around the rocky outcrop. The distance was long, the sun was mercilessly overhead, and the air was filled with a chaotic mix of buzzing flies and flying bullets. Abdullah and Gul opened fire from behind the rocks. To be fair, credit where it's due, these guys weren't terrible shots. Gul Muhammad had likely seen combat in his younger days along the Indian frontier, the Northwest Frontier province. Abdullah, on the other hand, well, he was doing his best. But the opposing firepower was absurd. Members of the Rifle Club, armed with scoped rifles and a full weekend's worth of bottled-up energy, poured bullets onto the rocks. Stone shattered, dust clouds rose, and bullets ricocheting off quartz screamed through the air with horrifying sounds. At that moment, Mullah Abdullah's inner voice was probably something like, "Bro, these weapons are insane. I shoot the guy, he doesn't die. 5 seconds later, I'm the one taking damage. This is definitely cheating, 100% hacks." Gul Muhammad, however, was more realistic. "Mullah, we're running out of ammo. The ice cream cart is full of holes. The ice cream is melted. Do we have a plan B?" "Mullah, plan B is martyrdom, nephew. Now get behind that rock or you're screwed." The end of the ice cream cart. One of the most tragic moments of the battle was when the ice cream cart was officially declared out of combat. This veteran vehicle, used as strategic cover, absorbed hundreds of bullets. Its wheels were destroyed. Its wooden body turned into splinters. Just think about it. A vehicle that had spent years bringing joy to children, saving hot summer days, now sitting in the heart of Australia as frontline cover in an international diplomatic crisis and armed conflict. It felt like an unreleased Pixar movie, Cars but rated 18 plus, full of violence and existential despair. As the cart's soul ascended into the heavens, it probably whispered, "I just wanted to sell Mirage Dottle ice cream." The final boss fight, HP reaches 0. As the hours passed, Mullah Abdullah entered red screen mode. You know, when the edges of the screen turn bloody and you hear that ominous heartbeat sound. The Australians tightened the circle. Here's a fun detail. The firefight was such an amateurish mess that the Australians had to make a serious effort to not shoot each other during crossfire. We have no hard evidence that a few Australian members didn't accidentally shoot their neighbor's hat in the excitement, but we have strong suspicions. Eventually, the inevitable happened. Mullah Abdullah was shot in the head and died on the spot. No respawn available. Gul Muhammad was seriously wounded. Out of ammunition, he may have considered a final melee attack, but the Australian police and enraged townspeople charged the rocks yelling "Rush B." Gul Muhammad died shortly after while being transported to the hospital. His last words were not recorded, but they were probably something along the lines of, "I'm reporting this to the server admin. These teams were not balanced." Aftermath: looting the battlefield. When the fighting was over, the dust settled, and adrenaline levels finally dropped. The Australians gathered around the bodies and the now legendary ice cream cart to collect the loot. So, who recorded this historic moment? When the army officially announced the captured war trophies, the confusion somehow increased. Recovered items: 2 Mauser rifles, 1 handmade Ottoman flag, which Australian newspapers proudly labeled the next day as the Turkish flag, even though the flag was technically incorrect. The colors were off. Details matter, but not in wartime journalism. The wreckage of the ice cream cart. Notes found in Mullah Abdullah's pocket. Not a debt ledger, more like suicide notes. The most absurd trophy in military history. Here's the truly ridiculous part. For a while, the ice cream cart itself was displayed as war booty. Yes, really. Not a tank, not an aircraft, not an enemy battle standard. A wheeled, vanilla-scented, bullet-riddled wooden box. It easily qualifies as one of the strangest potential museum pieces in Australian military history. Legacy: the Turks, but not really. After the incident, the Australian press and public referred to the attackers simply as the Turks. Why? Because at the time, Australia was fighting the Ottoman Empire at Gallipoli, and this label fit the enemy narrative nicely. But here's the ironic and tragic truth. Mullah Abdullah and Gul Muhammad came from the region of today's Pakistan-India border, Pashtun territory. They were not ethnically Turkish. However, they felt loyal to the Caliph, the Ottoman Sultan. So essentially, they joined the war with the logic of, "I don't have Netflix subscription, but my friend gave me his password, so technically I'm part of the Netflix family." For the Australian public, though, the distinction didn't matter. Brown? Check. Muslim? Check. Shooting at people? Check. Then he's Turkish. Stamp it, move on. Bureaucratic copy-paste was already working flawlessly back then. Closing scene: the end of an era. And so, on January 1st, 1915, the Battle of Broken Hill came to an end. Final scoreboard: Mullah and Gul, 0, both lost their lives. Australia, 1, with significant prestige damage. Casualties: 4 Australians killed, 7 wounded. Ice cream cart, total loss. History remembers this day as the day 2 men declared war on an entire continent. No backup forces, no radio, no air support. Just faith, anger, and a wheeled ice cream stand. Epilogue: if you visit Broken Hill today, the white rocks are still standing. And if you listen closely to the wind, you might hear Abdullah asking, "Is the back of this rock safe?" Or Gul Muhammad muttering, "If my visa application had been approved, we'd be running a kebab shop in Sydney right now. Why are we even here?" And with that, we reach the end of this absurd, tragicomic, and completely real story. Lessons learned: never go to war with an ice cream cart. Never anger bureaucracy. Never declare war on a state under the Australian sun. Game over. If you follow us and leave a comment, you'll help decide the next strange and fascinating topic we cover.